Good afternoon, cyberspace. Things look a little different here at Run Free Studios, don't they? We're actually starting to get things dialed in. So I'm going to check to make sure that my sound is working with everybody. And it does look like I can get to the chat. Let's make sure that I can. All right. In the booth, can you hear my sound? All right. Sound check. Okay, sound is there. See, it's amazing. This is why you should trust me with all of your answers, because I can actually finally use a microphone after 4 failed attempts. Anyway, really appreciate you taking the time to join me this afternoon. Full disclosure, I started wearing contact lenses yesterday. Very excited about this. So if it looks like I've been crying, I have, but the contact lenses haven't made it any better. If you aren't already subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and close the chat, like the video, and subscribe. You'll get notifications when we publish this stuff. The idea behind Sprint TV is to give you tools that aren't going to cost you anything but your time to make your online presence better and to help support the industry and you as a retailer or as a partner of ours or a participant in the running industry, run specialty space. And hopefully, as we have already, get some really great feedback about the stuff that you guys want to hear more about, or discussions that you want to have. Speaking of, SEO is the big discussion right now. It pretty much always is. It's incredibly confusing, and trying to figure out how to enter into even developing an SEO strategy is practically impossible unless you've done work in the space before. And there are some really great firms out there that have done some amazing work for folks. But, you know, as a retailer, staring down the barrel of how can I maximize the return on my investment, both online and in store, SEO is going to come up. And hopefully this next series of talks will help you get started in forming your strategy. I do want to give a little background today. So this is the first in a series of 3, possibly 4 sessions. The next session will actually be on the floor at the running event, booth 915, which is the Run Free booth. We're going to be doing it live on Wednesday, the 30th at 1 p.m. That's Central Time. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we're trying to accomplish at that live event, and then we'll follow up afterwards. And hopefully at that point, you'll have a really great starting point from an SEO perspective. So let me jump over here and get us to where we can see my screen. All right, so first things first, let's talk a little bit about online and run specialty. Upper Quadrant and the Running Industry Association did some really great work putting together, and continue to do some great work putting together info. There we go. Hung up on me there for a second. Good grief. Putting together info about what's going on in the space, aggregating data, providing that data to everybody through Cadence. So thank you guys for doing that. And you've probably seen this slide before if you've paid attention to this show. This tells us, on average, that the number of online transactions is 5.73% the number of total transactions for any given running store USA. It also tells us that online revenue makes up 5.33% of total revenue online as an aggregate. These numbers being very close together tell us that people who are shopping online are buying the same things that they're buying in store. Now, generally speaking, from a retail perspective, and I'm sure everybody's heard this before and bangs their head against the wall whenever they hear it again, you're looking at an optimum of somewhere between 10 and 20% of your total revenue coming from online sales. But run specialty is different. This industry was built on the in-person experience and thrives on the in-person experience. And so it's completely normal for us to see these numbers being a little bit lower on average than other industries, because the in-person experience is a humongous part of the value that you're bringing, and it always will be. But there's a couple of things to keep in mind when you think about online, because from an immediate perspective, you might say, well, then online doesn't matter. The reality is that it's 2022 and everyone uses the internet. You've probably seen this before as well. According to Salesforce, 87% of shoppers look online to check for product visibility, for product availability, if I can learn how to read, before visiting the store. That's 87% of shoppers of this group surveyed, of course. They're looking online. Now, a lot of them are going in store and some of them are going online, but everybody's checking online. And if there isn't an online presence, then their business likely goes somewhere where there is, or an optimal online presence, which we'll talk about more in a few minutes. Google themselves actually said that 76% of people who conduct a local search on their smartphone visit a physical business within 24 hours. That's crazy. 76%. So if I do a search for ATVs near me, there's a good chance that I'm going to be buying an ATV within the next 24 hours. Honey, if you're watching, I'm just kidding. So what does this tell us? This tells us that in the age of the internet, the in-person experience that our industry is so well known for is supported by a good, healthy online presence that is illustrative of what the in-person experience is going to show. So that means when I look online, I should see what you carry. I should kind of feel like I'm dealing with you and not like I'm dealing with an entirely separate entity. That's a conversation for another day. But optimizing online is a huge deal because it ultimately leads to sales. And of course, that is what everybody's here for. So when we think about optimizing online, everybody wants more traffic, and for good reason. You should want more traffic. Search engine optimization is the first thing that comes up. Now, what exactly is search engine optimization? So at its simplest, everybody on the planet opens up a browser somewhere, whether it's on their mobile device or sitting at their computer, and searches for the stuff that they need. Now, Google pretty much owns the space as far as this is concerned. There are others, Presearch, DuckDuckGo, Yahoo, Bing. I don't even know if web crawlers around. Maybe you remember Alta Vista. Anyway, Google pretty much owns it. They've done most of the research into the tools that rank websites, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes as well. And they really do own the space. And search engine optimization is essentially the practice of making sure that you have an answer to the questions that people type into Google looking for answers for. And the more relevant your answer is to any given question, the higher you're going to rank in Google search results. And the higher you rank, the better you are, because the more visitors you have. And obviously, sales is a numbers game. Good grief, I can't speak today. My contacts have removed my ability to talk. Don't you wish that was actually true? And so there is an entire art of trying to figure out how to get to the top of this keyword list. And it is truly a mix of science and art. So the folklore tells us that there are at least 200 factors that Google takes into account when ranking a website. Now, I say folklore because the actual way that they rank is an industry secret. It's their intellectual property. They are not telling anybody, but they do some things publicly that give us a couple of really good hints about how things work. First, they have probably the most important document in all of search engine optimization. It is 167 pages of reading bliss. I would highly suggest taking a look at it. It's called the QRG, or Quality Raters Guidelines. So what Google does is they go out and they hire thousands, literally thousands of people, regular Joes like me and you, and they hand them this 167-page document, and they say, go look at websites and answer all the questions in these guidelines. And they aggregate all of those answers and they compare it to the output of their AI. AI, artificial intelligence, is the algorithm, if you will, that Google has been developing and continues to evolve that tells me which search results are the most relevant to me. It is ever changing, and using the quality raters guidelines, knowing that Google compares the output of real human interaction to the output of their AI and uses that to tune their AI, we also know where they're headed and what means what to them when we look through the quality raters guidelines. Now, there are a million different ways to enter into the SEO conversation. There are some great tools out there. You've probably heard of Ahrefs and Moz. They make some really good keyword search tools and other things. But those cost money, and we like to focus on things that you can do from a grassroots perspective on this channel. Standing on the shoulders of giants, or in this case, on the head of a giant, is really more what we're all about. The other thing is that when you're getting started with SEO, it's important to think about the highest level conceptual, philosophical idea behind how search engines optimize their results, and less important to think about all the technical details. So even though the technical details do matter, absolutely, the most important thing that you can focus on first is relevance. Everything revolves around relevance. In fact, relevance is more important than the technical details. And the reason that relevance is more important than the technical details is because Google's AI and everything that powers its search engine optimization changes constantly. It's different in 2022 than it was in 2020. It's way different now than it was in 2017, 2015, 2016. And as it evolves, it is harder and harder to game that system. And the technical requirements will change over time. What will not change over time is that if you are providing an answer that's relevant to the question that's being asked in Google search, a legitimate answer, a real attempt at actually answering the person's question with an informative presentation, then the relevance of that content will increase over time. If you're trying to game the system with technical tweaks, you will find that you put a lot of effort into those technical tweaks and you don't get much out of it. And if you do get something out of it, it doesn't last very long if you're missing that relevance piece. So we're going to talk about how to achieve that. A couple of things about Google search. Like I said, things change. Today, there are really two types of results. And I've simplified this to some degree because there's literally hundreds of thousands of pages and videos and books and all that kind of stuff about SEO. This is the distilled version for run specialty retailers trying to figure out what to do. Okay, so give me a break on some of the details if you're going to be a stickler. First, there are web page related results. So what that means is that is an answer to a question that is a general question. What did I ask here? How do bees make honey? So whether I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, or Azerbaijan, the answer to the question, how do bees make honey, is going to be pretty darn close to the same, right? Then there are, and we call those web page related. Those are universal question and answer. And then there are place related. So if I search for bakery, Google is going to assume that I'm looking for a bakery near me, and it's going to give me results based on where I am. And if you search bakery and you're not in my backyard, you're going to get totally different results. And we call those results place related. And local search, Google local listings, the Google Business Profile, which used to be called Google My Business. All of that stuff, it plays into the place-related search results. Regardless, these are two different styles of results, and they are attacked in two very different ways. So, one thing to keep in mind as a rule of thumb, web page related Google search results are generally much higher competition, meaning that it is much harder for me as some guy to come in and create enough content to rank at the top of the Google search results for how do bees make honey, because there's a lot of people out there writing about how bees make honey and spending a ton of money to get up to the top of those search results because it's so generic and global. Place-related results are less competitive because they are place-specific, and it's easier for me to rank high in place-related results than it is for me to rank high in web page-related results. And the higher the competition, the more expensive it is to compete there. The lower the competition, the less expensive it is. Hopefully you get where I'm going with this. So with place-related results, which of course is relatively new to the space within the past couple of years, we add two more little folds to the considerations that Google and other search engines take into account. So obviously relevance is number one. Your web page, it needs to be the most relevant possible answer to the question that's being asked in Google search, bar none, to rank at the top. But now we're also taking into account the distance that you say your business is from the person who's conducting the search and the prominence that you have from a local perspective. So if your business has a lot of Google business profile rankings or ratings, then Google's going to consider your prominence higher. If your name, address, and phone number in your Google business profile is the exact same as appears on the contact page of your website and on, trickled throughout your e-commerce store, and all of that information shows up in the other listings in the area, and you're clearly well known in the community because of social media links and other things, your prominence rises even further. A couple of things to keep in mind here. Prominence and relevance are concepts, not absolute sciences. There are things that we can do to maximize this stuff, but really it's about aiming things generally in this direction than it is about meeting some perfect threshold. Okay. So think with the art side of your brain and less so with the analytical side once we get through this part. And I want to talk a little bit about competition, because this is typically the place where we make the first mistakes when it comes to planning and thinking about SEO. So, and I'm purposefully not using run specialty or anything like that because I don't want to confuse the point. I want to come at this from a novice mind perspective while we're having this conversation. If I go and search on Google for hiking, I'm going to get tons of results, and the top keyword ranking for hiking in Google is going to be so competitive that my ability to list anywhere near that is going to be severely hindered. It is so competitive that it's going to cost me an unbelievable amount of money to show up anywhere near the top of the rankings for hiking. But keep in mind how people use Google. They're typically asking a question. They're looking for the answer to something. So when I'm searching for hiking in Google, what I'm really probably looking for is something more about where I am in my circumstances. And this is where the trick comes in. If I search winter hiking in North Carolina as an alternate, there are a few hundred monthly Google searches, meaning that the competition is substantially lower for the top spot when somebody says winter hiking in North Carolina into Google. And so I am far better served by focusing on questions that I think my customers would ask and answering those questions by creating content. If I created a blog post that talks about winter hiking in North Carolina, and I created the ultimate guide to winter hiking in North Carolina and included the value that my running store brings, or my outdoor store, or whatever it is brings in that guide, then the chances of that guide rating at the top of Google when somebody says winter hiking in North Carolina are very, very high. However, no matter what I do, I will never make it to the top of the rankings with just hiking. And this really kind of speaks to what we want to do with our SEO strategy. We want to focus on lower competition, highly specific questions that your customers might want to know answers to, and then going and answering those questions. So, for example, let's say I'm looking for photographers in Boise, Idaho. Okay. If I go and I search for photographer, it's going to be a highly competitive keyword that I'm searching for. It's going to cost my local photographer so much money to rank at the top of that they shouldn't even try. If I go and search for photographer in Boise, Idaho, there's probably quite a few rankings. And, most of the photographers up there probably have their Google business profiles dialed in. They've probably got some good customer reviews. And I could go head to head with them from that perspective and try to get as many customer reviews as I possibly can and just hammer away at that Google profile and hope for the best. Or I could go in and say, what are the more detailed questions that somebody might be asking when they think about photographers in Boise, Idaho? So for example, how much do family portrait sessions cost? Or do professional photographers usually give you digital photos at the end of your session? Where are the best places in Boise, Idaho to have senior pictures taken? Super specific questions, reasonable questions that anyone might ask when they were thinking about hiring a photographer. And if I can create content, meaning a blog post, it's the easiest way to do it, that answers that question, that specifically answers that question and references me and my domain. By domain, I mean mycompany.com. And I repeat that to answer as many specific questions as I possibly can, my authority goes up, meaning that Google considers me to be an expert on the subject in the area. And not only does my Google business profile improve my potential for showing up at the top of keywords, but now that authority raises my ability even further. And when my customers are in Google asking the legitimate questions that somebody might ask in their position, I'm the first one to show up at the top, because there probably aren't a whole lot of pieces of content out there that are talking about the best places to get senior pictures taken in Boise, Idaho. And so that is the key to this whole exercise. And remember, intent is everything. This is my personal mantra. This goes into the SEO conversation as well. Back when I started as a professional marketer, you could make sure that you had your key phrases put in the right places. If you had the keywords mentioned in the title, if it's bolded in the first paragraph, and then you have it used, 5 separate times, separated by 2 or 3 sentences, and your blog entry or web page is at least 1,400 words long, then you've tricked Google into thinking that you're the top authority and you're good to go. Doesn't work that way anymore. And we can expect that it won't work that way in the future either. In fact, the ability to game Google through technical manipulation is going to get lower over time. But if you approach your search engine optimization with the intent of helping your customer by answering specific questions that your customer would ask using a blog, then your intent is to help these people. And as time goes on, as the AI gets better, your intent can be easily read and your listings will improve. Now, there's a few other things that I want to jump through before we talk about the specifics of this exercise. Okay, I'm sure you can probably figure out where I'm going here. One is what they call the sort of the ghost town phenomenon. So the best thing that you can do for SEO, the best, hands down, besides making sure that your Google business profile is dialed in, which we'll talk about in a second, is to start a blog. And I know that's bad news because not everybody likes to write and there's not a shortcut around it, but there is no more effective way to improve your keyword results and where you rank in Google than to create a blog. And if you write one blog post a week, then you are ready to rock and roll. If you can do 2 a month, that's great. And planning for what you might cover in that blog to maximize your search engine optimization is the workshop we're going to do together on the floor at the running event. More about that in a couple of minutes. But doing that over time will lead to substantially better results than you could get by trying to tweak the technicals on your website. Even though tweaking the technicals on your website matters, the relevance of your content matters more. And so the ghost town syndrome essentially is it takes Google a little while to kind of catch up with the intent that you're putting out there. And so the pros say that it can be anywhere from like 6 to 8 months. I don't think it's that long. I haven't seen the same delay in time. But what they mean is that if you start writing blogs about all things photography in Boise, Idaho, because you're a photographer in Boise, Idaho, and you're doing your best to answer your customers' specific questions, it will take a little while for Google to recognize, oh, this person is becoming an authority on this subject in this specific area. And because they've established their authority, I know that I can rank them higher because the likelihood of them being relevant to search results that orbit all of those questions is better. In other words, the first couple of months, you might not see an immediate jump in traffic, but as soon as you get ahead of steam and you develop that authority, then you can rank first in Google search results after a single blog post about a specific subject, after you've developed the authority and after you've consistently published content about your subject. In fact, we'll go back to the photography thing. Photography in Boise, Idaho, if I answer all of the questions that surround photography in Boise, Idaho, but never optimize for photography in Boise, Idaho as a keyword, the act of me answering all of those questions and being a relevant result in all of those very human, readable, human exampled search results is going to improve my ranking for photographer in Boise, Idaho more than me writing a whole bunch of content that's specific to that keyword. Because it is all about intent and it's all about relevance. So, what does that mean for us as an exercise here? What are we doing? What's this easy SEO thing? What the heck are you blabbering about, Rob? Well, the first thing that we're going to do, the first thing that we're going to focus on is your Google business profile. Getting your Google business profile set up and dialed in is tied with the most effective thing that you can do to improve your standings on the internet. I will be the first to say that dealing with Google's tools is not the most fun thing. Their user experience changes all the time. The name of the stuff changes all the time. It's kind of hard to get around and figure out what they're trying to ask you to do. But stepping through and setting up your Google business profile, which used to be called Google My Business, and figuring out ways to campaign to your customers to rate your business on the Google Business Profile, making sure that you've got all your stuff up to date on there as far as pictures of the store and your name and address and phone number and so on, will be very effective in helping you rank. So Google Business Profile is the first piece. And the second piece, which is ultimately the most important, is your blog. And like I said, I know everybody's not excited about writing a blog, but we're going to step through the exercise of figuring out how to make it not so overwhelming and figuring out how to specifically focus on search engine optimization around whatever you value as a customer to make sure that every blog entry that you make is an investment in your authority in the space. And conceptually, it's not as hard as it seems. Sitting down and writing the content and making it relevant, it's work. It's work, but it's work that's worth it because you can reuse that content. Relevance is what drives everything from a search and presentation perspective on the internet. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, you name it. If those platforms see that you're interacting with something, they're going to assume that it's relevant to what you're doing. And just like advertisements on Google, advertisements on these social media platforms are highly competitive when you talk about commodity level keywords. So hiking, if I try to run an advertisement about hiking or about the new North Face jacket or something along those lines, I'm going to be competing with everybody else on the planet to get top spot who has anything to do with hiking or North Face jackets. On the contrary, if I run an ad about the most experienced backpackers in Charlotte, North Carolina, shop at my store, and here's what they have to say about backpacking in winter in North Carolina, that's going to be far more relevant than trying to sell a jacket. And so this relevance exercise will help you across everywhere. And so the idea is to develop first a keyword strategy. So we're all going to sit down at the running event and we're going to go through a keyword strategy / keyword research exercise together so that you know how to do this. And then you'll go home, sit down with your employees, your family, your friends, your drinking buddies, whoever, and do this keyword strategy yourself. And you'll have a list of things that you can focus on from a blog perspective that will be hyper effective in making sure that when somebody goes to Google and searches for anything that has anything to do with your store, that you are competing for the top spot. And I assure you, it's easier than you think. And if you focus on relevance first, all the other stuff, like making sure that you've got words bolded and that your web pages load quickly and all that kind of stuff, you can go back and scrub that after the fact. It's creating that relevant content that's the most important. And the time that you commit to doing that, in other words, if I'm publishing a blog post a week or a blog post every 2 weeks, and I do that for 6 months, 8 months, a year, that's the fact that I've done that over that time and maintained consistency and increased my relevance through that process tells Google that my intent is good, that I'm out to help people, and I'm going to rank higher. So putting in the time really does make a huge difference and is more valuable than getting it technically perfect from the jump. Hopefully all of this makes sense to you. I know I rambled. I always ramble, but the key here is there's a million different ways that you can try to tackle search engine optimization. But the most effective ways to start, in my opinion, are first to make sure your Google Business Profile is accurate and that it's filled out and that you're asking people to go and rate you there so that when somebody searches for bakery in Charlotte, North Carolina, my bakery shows up at the top. The second is to start a blog. It's the most important thing you can do. Start a blog and write figure out your keyword research, the questions that you want to answer for your customers that are locally relevant, because local relevance is easier to rank for. In other words, not what are the best hiking shoes, but the best coats for winter hiking in North Carolina. The difference between those two things may not seem like that big of a deal, but from a search engine perspective and from a competition perspective, it's night and day. So next time when we're all in person at the running event, if I can remember what it's called, in Austin, remember Wednesday the 30th at booth 915, the Run Free booth, 1 p.m., we're going to go through a keyword research exercise together, and I'll show you how we do it. And then you can take that home and work on it with your team. And then we're going to get back together after the running event with the keywords that we researched, and we're going to start our practice blog together, and I'll walk you through the whole process. I will likely follow that up with something about the Google Business Profile. It is very important. There's a lot of resources out there about doing your Google Business Profile correctly. And as much as Google changes, I'm more interested in making sure that we nail this blog relevance SEO thing first, and then come back to the Google Business Profile next. So that's my plan. I really hope to see you guys at the running event. If this is your first time joining us, thank you so much for taking the time today. Hopefully this was useful, and come join us Wednesday the 30th at the running event in Austin, booth 915, for our keyword research brainstorm session, and then come back to the YouTube channel and join us for putting it into action. And you can take this and steal it and use it for yourself, and it'll be locally relevant to where you are, who you are, and what you're doing, and you'll be able to reasonably compete without breaking the bank. The other great thing is that there are a lot of amazing marketing agencies and helpers and innovators in the run specialty space. And so as you're doing these exercises yourself and improving your relevance in the space through your blog posts and your Google Business Profile, the agencies that you know and love can help support that through advertising and optimization and doing the things that they've done for you already, supercharged by this content that you create. So everyone wins when you focus on relevance, local listings, good intentioned keyword research, and execution. All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining me today. Hopefully the sound worked. I got a couple of chats telling me that it did, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. And have a very happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you